The smoke was so thick that Samantha couldn't see her own hand in front of her face. She pressed herself against the bathroom floor, her cheek against the cold tile, gasping for whatever clean air remained in the narrow pocket between the ground and the poisonous gray cloud that had swallowed her apartment. Her lungs burned with every breath, and her eyes streamed tears that had nothing to do with crying, though she wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. But screaming meant breathing deeper, and breathing deeper meant pulling more of that acrid, chemical-tasting smoke into her chest. She didn't know how the fire had started. One moment she'd been curled up on her couch with a book and a cup of chamomile tea, enjoying a rare, quiet Sunday afternoon. The next, her smoke detector was shrieking, and when she'd opened her bedroom door to investigate, a wall of heat and smoke had slammed into her with physical force. She'd stumbled backward, disoriented, her mind refusing to process what was happening. By the time she'd made it to the bathroom, the only room with a window, the only room that felt like it might offer escape, the hallway had become impassable. Flames licked at the doorframe. The roar of the fire was like a living thing, hungry and relentless. Now she lay on the bathroom floor, her wet towel pressed over her nose and mouth, and she thought about all the things she hadn't done yet. She was only 26. She hadn't traveled to Ireland like she'd always planned. She hadn't finished writing that novel she'd been working on for 3 years. She hadn't told her mother that she forgave her for missing her college graduation. She hadn't fallen in love, real love, the kind that made you feel like you'd finally found the place where you belonged. The window above the bathtub was too small to climb through, and even if she could have fit, she was on the 4th floor. There was nowhere to go. The fire department had to be coming. Someone had to have called. But the smoke was getting thicker and her lungs were getting weaker, and she could feel herself starting to drift, her thoughts becoming fuzzy and strange. She heard glass shatter somewhere in the apartment. More fire, more destruction. Everything she owned was burning. Her grandmother's quilt, her collection of first edition books, the photographs of her father who had died when she was 12, all of it turning to ash while she lay here, helpless, waiting to join them. Then she heard something else. A voice, deep and commanding, cutting through the roar and crackle of the flames. "Fire department! Call out if you can hear me!" Samantha tried to respond, but her throat was raw, and all that came out was a weak, rasping cough. She banged her fist against the tile floor, once, twice, 3 times. "Please hear me. Please find me. Please!" The bathroom door burst open, and through the smoke, she saw him. He was wearing full turnout gear, his face obscured by a mask, but his eyes, she could see his eyes through the visor. They were scanning the room, searching, and when they found her on the floor, something in them shifted. Relief, determination, purpose. He crossed the small bathroom in 2 strides and knelt beside her. Up close, she could see the soot streaked across his gear, could hear the sound of his breathing apparatus, steady and mechanical. He was big, broad shoulders, strong arms, and when he reached for her, his gloved hands were impossibly gentle. "I've got you. You're going to be okay. Can you put your arms around my neck?" Samantha nodded weakly, reaching up with trembling arms. He scooped her off the floor like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. She buried her face against his shoulder, her fingers gripping the fabric of his coat, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. Despite the fire raging around them, despite the smoke and the heat and the very real possibility that they might not make it out, she felt safe. He carried her out of the bathroom and into the hallway, which had become an inferno. She could feel the heat, even through his protective gear, could see the flames dancing on either side of them, like they were walking through the mouth of hell itself. But he moved with confidence, his stride sure and steady, his arms never wavering. "Keep your face down. We're almost there." She did as he said, pressing her nose and mouth against his shoulder, breathing in the smell of smoke and sweat and something else, something clean and solid beneath it all. She could feel his heart beating through the layers of gear, strong and steady, a counterpoint to her own racing pulse. They reached the stairwell, and he started down, taking the steps quickly but carefully. Samantha could hear other voices now, shouting, the crackle of radios, the distant wail of more sirens. Help was here. Help had found her. He had found her. When they emerged from the building into the cold afternoon air, Samantha gasped, pulling oxygen into her damaged lungs. The sky above was gray with smoke, and flashing lights painted everything in shades of red and blue. Paramedics rushed toward them, but the firefighter who had saved her didn't immediately hand her off. He carried her to the ambulance himself, setting her down on the gurney with that same impossible gentleness. Then he pulled off his mask, and she saw his face for the first time. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with a strong jaw darkened by stubble and eyes that were a striking shade of green, like sea glass. His dark hair was damp with sweat, pressed flat against his forehead, and there was a smudge of soot across his cheek. He was, objectively, one of the most handsome men she had ever seen. But it wasn't his looks that made her breath catch. It was the way he was looking at her. Like she mattered. Like saving her had been personal somehow. "You're safe now. The paramedics are going to take good care of you." "Thank you." Her voice came out as barely a whisper, her throat raw and aching. "You saved my life." He smiled then, just a small curve of his lips, but it transformed his whole face, made him look younger, made her want to keep looking. "Just doing my job." He paused, and something flickered in those green eyes. "I'm glad I found you in time." Then the paramedics were there, fitting an oxygen mask over her face, taking her vitals, asking questions she could barely process. When she looked up again, searching for him, he was gone, swallowed back into the chaos of firefighters and hoses and the skeletal remains of her building. She didn't even know his name. The hospital kept her overnight for observation. Smoke inhalation, they said. Her oxygen levels were concerning, and they wanted to make sure her lungs were recovering properly. Samantha lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, and tried to process everything that had happened. Her apartment was gone. Everything she owned was gone. Her insurance would cover some of it, she supposed, but you couldn't insure memories. You couldn't insure the feeling of home. Her best friend, Kelsey, arrived around 9 that night, bursting through the door with mascara-streaked cheeks and a bag full of clothes she'd grabbed from her own closet. "Oh my God, Sam. Oh my God. When I saw the news, I thought I couldn't—" "I'm okay." Samantha reached for her hand. "I'm okay, Kels. I got out." "You almost didn't. They said the whole 4th floor was engulfed. How did you—" "A firefighter found me, carried me out." Samantha closed her eyes, and she could still feel it, his arms around her, his heartbeat against her cheek. "I don't even know his name." Kelsey stayed with her through the night, sleeping fitfully in the uncomfortable visitor's chair. When morning came, a doctor pronounced Samantha well enough to be discharged, with strict instructions to rest and follow up with her primary care physician if she experienced any breathing difficulties. Samantha walked out of the hospital in borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit, clutching a plastic bag containing the smoke-damaged outfit she'd been wearing when they brought her in. She had nowhere to go. Her apartment was a crime scene, or whatever they called it when a building burned down. Her car had been parked in the underground garage and was likely destroyed. Her phone had been on the coffee table when the fire started, and it was surely nothing but melted plastic and shattered glass now. Kelsey took her home, to Kelsey's tiny one-bedroom in Midtown, and settled her on the couch with a cup of tea and a blanket. Then she sat down across from her, her expression serious. Okay, we need to make a plan. You can stay here as long as you need, obviously, and we need to call your mom and your insurance company and probably a lawyer. I know. Samantha wrapped her hands around the warm mug. I know. I need a minute. I need to process. Of course. Take all the time you need. Kelsey paused. But Sam, you're alive. You're here. Everything else can be replaced. She was right. Samantha knew she was right. But sitting there, wearing her best friend's clothes, drinking tea from her best friend's mug, she had never felt more lost in her life. 3 days later, Samantha was starting to find her footing. She'd filed a claim with her insurance company, gotten a new phone, and begun the tedious process of replacing her identification documents. She'd called her mother, endured 20 minutes of tearful recriminations about how she never should have moved to that old building in the first place, and promised to come home for a visit soon. She'd even started looking at apartment listings, though everything felt wrong somehow. Too expensive, too small, too not home. She was sitting in Kelsey's kitchen, scrolling through her new phone, when there was a knock at the door. Kelsey was at work, so Samantha got up to answer it, expecting a delivery driver or maybe one of the neighbors. Instead, she found a man standing in the hallway. He was tall, with dark hair and green eyes, and he was holding a cardboard box in his hands. It took her a moment to recognize him without the gear and the soot and the smoke. You. He smiled, that same small curve of his lips she remembered from the ambulance bay. Me. I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I got your information from the incident report. I wanted to... He held up the box. When we were clearing the building, I found some things that survived. I thought you might want them. Samantha stared at him, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. He had come to find her. He had saved things from the fire and brought them to her. He was standing in the hallway of her best friend's apartment, looking almost nervous, like he wasn't sure if he'd overstepped. Please, come in. She stepped back and he entered, looking around the small space with that same observant intensity she remembered from the bathroom. Like he was assessing for exits, for hazards, for anything that might go wrong. An occupational habit, she supposed. He set the box on the kitchen table and Samantha looked inside. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't much. A few books, their covers warped but their pages intact. A jewelry box containing her grandmother's wedding ring, the one piece of family jewelry she owned. And a photograph, singed at the edges but still whole, of her father holding her on his shoulders when she was 4 years old. She didn't realize she was crying until she felt the tears on her cheeks. I thought everything was gone. She picked up the photograph, cradling it against her chest. I thought I'd lost this forever. I found them in the closet in your bedroom. The door was closed, and that protected them from the worst of it. He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable with her gratitude. I know it's not much. I'm sorry I couldn't save more. No, this is everything. You have no idea. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, feeling suddenly self-conscious. She was standing in Kelsey's kitchen in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair in a messy bun, crying in front of this man who had now saved her twice. I'm sorry. I'm a mess. You're not a mess. You're someone who just lost everything and is handling it incredibly well. He paused. I'm Jacob, by the way. I don't think I ever introduced myself. Samantha, but I guess you already knew that. I did. He smiled again, and something about it made her stomach flutter. It's nice to officially meet you, Samantha. She should offer him something to drink. That was the polite thing to do. But she found herself just standing there, holding the photograph of her father, looking at this man who had carried her out of a burning building and then tracked her down to return the remnants of her life. Why did you do this? Come here, I mean. Bring me these things. He was quiet for a moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, something vulnerable. I've been doing this job for 8 years. I've pulled a lot of people out of bad situations, and usually that's it. You save them, you hand them off to the medics, and you never see them again. You don't know if they're okay. You don't know if they recovered. They just disappear into the rest of their lives. He met her eyes. I don't know why, but with you, I couldn't stop wondering. I needed to know you were all right. Samantha felt something shift in her chest, something warm and unexpected. I'm all right, thanks to you. No, you survived because you kept your head. You got to the bathroom, you stayed low, you did everything right. I just opened the door. You carried me through a burning building. I've got strong arms. But he was smiling as he said it, and there was something in his eyes, something that made her think he wasn't just here because he wanted to check on her welfare. Something that made her think he might be feeling the same flutter in his stomach that she was feeling in hers. It was crazy. She barely knew him. They'd met under the most traumatic circumstances imaginable. There were 100 reasons why this feeling blooming in her chest was probably just misplaced gratitude, adrenaline, survivor's euphoria. And yet, would you like to stay for coffee? He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing something. Professionalism versus something else. Protocol versus instinct. I'd like that. They talked for 2 hours. Samantha learned that Jacob was 31, that he'd been a firefighter since he was 23, and that he'd originally gone to college to be an engineer before realizing he needed a job that felt like it mattered. She learned that he had a younger sister who was a nurse in Boston, and parents who were retired and living in Florida. She learned that he played guitar badly, read history books for fun, and had a golden retriever named Murphy, who was, according to him, the most spoiled dog in the 5 boroughs. In return, she told him about her job as a junior editor at a small publishing house, about her dreams of writing her own novels someday, about her complicated relationship with her mother, and her uncomplicated love for her late father. She told him about the apartment she'd lost, the exposed brick and the big windows and the fire escape where she used to sit and read on summer evenings. She told him about the book collection that had burned, years of careful curation reduced to ash in a single afternoon. Somewhere in the middle of their 3rd cup of coffee, She realized she hadn't thought about the fire in almost an hour. She'd just been talking, connecting, laughing at his terrible jokes and watching the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. When he finally stood to leave, the afternoon sun was slanting through Kelsey's windows, painting everything in shades of gold. I should probably go. I've got a shift starting at 6. He paused by the door, and she saw that vulnerability again, that uncertainty that seemed so at odds with the confident man who had carried her through flames. I know this is probably weird, the circumstances, I mean, but I'd like to see you again, if you want to. Samantha's heart was racing. This was the moment where she should probably say no, where she should explain that she was too fragile right now, too raw, too uncertain of her own feelings. She'd read enough psychology articles to know about trauma bonding, about the way extreme experiences could create artificial intimacy. She should be careful. But when she looked at Jacob, she didn't feel artificially intimate. She felt like she'd just had one of the best conversations of her life with someone who was kind and funny and unexpectedly thoughtful. She felt like she wanted to know what else was hiding behind those green eyes. I'd like that too. He smiled then, a real smile, wide and genuine, and it transformed his whole face, made him look like a kid who'd just been told he could have dessert before dinner. Great. That's great. He pulled out his phone. Can I get your number? I promise I'll only use it for good. She laughed, and it felt strange and wonderful, laughing after everything that had happened. She gave him her new number, and he saved it. And then he was gone, and she was standing alone in Kelsey's kitchen, wondering what exactly she'd just agreed to. Their first official date was a week later. He took her to a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, and a proprietor who clearly knew Jacob by name. Hey, Marco, table for 2? The older man behind the counter grinned and clapped Jacob on the shoulder. Jacob, you finally bring a woman. I was starting to worry about you. He turned his twinkling eyes to Samantha. Welcome, welcome. I give you the best table. Samantha felt her cheeks flush as Marco led them to a corner booth, fussing over them like they were visiting royalty. Jacob looked apologetic. Sorry about that. Marco's known me since I was a rookie. He has opinions about my personal life. He seems sweet. He's going to bring us entirely too much food and refuse to let us pay for any of it. Consider yourself warned. He was right. Over the next 2 hours, Marco brought course after course: bread with olive oil, caprese salad, homemade pasta, veal piccata, waving away their protests with theatrical flourishes. But Samantha barely noticed the abundance of food. She was too focused on Jacob. She learned more about him that night, about the call that had almost made him quit, a house fire where they'd arrived too late, where he'd had to carry out a child who didn't make it. His voice went rough when he talked about it, and she saw his hands clench around his wine glass. That was 4 years ago. I still think about her sometimes. Her name was Lily. She was 5. I'm so sorry, Jacob. I almost walked away after that. Turned in my gear, everything. But then I thought about all the people I wouldn't be there for if I quit. All the future Lilies I might actually be able to save. He looked up at her, and his eyes were bright with something that might have been unshed tears. When I found you in that bathroom, when I got you out, that's why I do this. That's why I stayed. Samantha reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time she'd touched him since he'd carried her out of the fire. and his skin was warm and rough with calluses. "Thank you for staying." He looked at their joined hands, and something shifted in his expression, something soft and wondering. "Thank you for surviving." The weeks that followed were a strange, beautiful blur. Samantha was still staying with Kelsey, still navigating the bureaucratic nightmare of rebuilding her life from scratch. But now there was Jacob. Texts throughout the day, funny observations about his colleagues, photos of Murphy being ridiculous, check-ins to make sure she was okay. Phone calls late at night when his shift was over and he couldn't sleep and just wanted to hear her voice. Dates that ranged from fancy dinners to walks in Central Park to lazy afternoons at his apartment playing with Murphy and watching old movies. She found herself thinking about him constantly. Not in the obsessive, anxious way she'd thought about boyfriends in the past, but in a warm, comfortable way. Like he'd become part of her mental landscape. Like thoughts of him were a place she could rest. But as her feelings deepened, so did her doubts. She was lying on Kelsey's couch one evening, 3 weeks into whatever this was with Jacob, when Kelsey came home from work and found her staring at the ceiling. "Okay, what's wrong? You've got your existential crisis face on." Samantha sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Am I being stupid?" Kelsey kicked off her heels and collapsed into the armchair across from her. "About what specifically? You have many potential stupidities to choose from." "About Jacob. About this, whatever this is." Samantha pulled at a loose thread in the blanket. "He saved my life, Kels. What if this isn't real? What if I'm just imprinting on him like a baby duck? What if it's all just trauma and gratitude dressed up as feelings?" Kelsey was quiet for a moment, studying her with those sharp, perceptive eyes. "Let me ask you something. When you're with him, do you think about the fire?" Samantha considered the question. "No, not really. I mean, sometimes it comes up, but mostly we just talk about everything else." "And when you're not with him, what do you think about?" "Him, his terrible jokes, the way he crinkles his nose when he laughs, the way he listens like what I'm saying actually matters." Samantha felt her cheeks warm. "The way he looks at me like I'm something precious." Kelsey smiled slowly. "Sam, that doesn't sound like trauma bonding. That sounds like you, actually. Like the guy." "But how do I know? How can I possibly separate what I feel from what happened?" "You can't. Not completely. But here's the thing. Every relationship starts from somewhere. Some couples meet at bars. Some meet at work. Some meet because one of them rescues the other from a fire. The how doesn't matter as much as the what comes after." She leaned forward. "The question isn't whether your feelings started in a traumatic place. The question is whether they've grown into something real." Samantha thought about Jacob's hand in hers across the restaurant table, about the way he'd opened up to her about Lily, about his fears and his guilt and his reasons for staying, about the way he texted her good morning every single day, even when he'd been up all night on a call. "I think they have." "Then maybe stop questioning it and just let yourself be happy." It was good advice. Samantha just wasn't sure she knew how to take it. The conversation she'd been dreading happened on a Sunday afternoon, a month after their first date. They were at Jacob's apartment, a comfortable 2-bedroom in Queens that was somehow exactly what she'd expected. Neat, but not obsessively tidy. decorated with eclectic art and stacks of books and framed photos of his family. Murphy was sprawled across the couch between them, his head in Samantha's lap, snoring contentedly. Jacob had been quiet for a while, and she could tell he was working up to something. She'd learned to read him over the past weeks. The way he got still when he was thinking, the way he rubbed the back of his neck when he was nervous. "Sam, can we talk about something?" Her stomach tightened, but she kept her voice calm. "Of course." He shifted to face her, and Murphy grumbled in protest before settling back down. "I keep thinking about how we met, and I keep wondering if I've done something wrong here." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I was the one who pulled you out of that fire. You were scared and vulnerable, and I was the person who saved you. There's a power imbalance there that I can't ignore." He looked down at his hands. "I looked you up after. I came to find you. I pursued you. And sometimes I lie awake at night wondering if I took advantage of the situation, if I took advantage of you." Samantha felt something crack open in her chest. He'd been carrying this too. The same doubts that had been keeping her up at night, except his were wrapped in guilt instead of uncertainty. "Jacob, look at me." He raised his eyes and she saw the worry there, the fear that he'd done something unforgivable. "You didn't take advantage of me. You didn't pursue someone who was helpless or confused. You brought me back things that mattered to me, and then you gave me your number and let me decide whether I wanted to call." She reached out and took his hand. "I'm not with you because you saved my life. I'm with you because you make me laugh, and you listen when I talk, and you remember little things I say and bring them up later. I'm with you because you're kind to waiters, and you love your dog an embarrassing amount, and you get emotional watching nature documentaries." She squeezed his fingers. "I'm with you because I like who you are, not because of what you did." He was staring at her, and she could see the tension slowly draining from his shoulders. "But how do you know? How can you be sure your feelings are real and not just trauma bonding?" He winced. "I've been reading about it. I wanted to make sure I wasn't." "You've been researching psychological concepts to make sure you weren't accidentally manipulating me?" "It sounds weird when you say it like that." "It sounds like something a good person would do." She shifted closer to him, and Murphy groaned and relocated to his dog bed. "Jacob, I've been having the same doubts, asking myself the same questions. But here's what I've realized. If this were just trauma bonding, I'd be obsessed with you. I'd be anxious when you weren't around, terrified of losing you, unable to function without your validation." She met his eyes. "But that's not how I feel. When you're not here, I miss you, but I'm okay. When we disagree about something, I don't panic that you're going to leave. I feel stable, safe, and not the kind of safe I felt when you carried me out of that fire. A different kind. The kind that comes from knowing someone and trusting them." He was silent for a long moment, processing her words. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "When did you get so wise?" "I read a lot of self-help books." He laughed, and the sound of it warmed something deep in her chest. Then he reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing gently across her cheekbones. "I like who you are too, Samantha. Not because you survived, not because you needed me, because you're smart and funny, and you care about things deeply, and you've been through hell this past month, and you're still standing." His voice dropped, soft and sincere. I've never felt like this about anyone, and it scares me, honestly. But I think that's how you know it's real. She leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth of his palms against her skin. It scares me too. Then we can be scared together. The first time Jacob's colleagues met Samantha, it didn't go well. Jacob had invited her to a barbecue at his captain's house, a monthly tradition for the crew of Station 47. She'd been nervous all week, picking out and discarding a dozen outfits, worrying about what to say, how to act, whether they would judge her. Her fears were confirmed about 20 minutes into the party. She was standing by the drinks table, pouring herself a lemonade, when she heard two firefighters talking on the other side of a hedge. They didn't know she was there. So that's the girl from the fire. Jacob's new squeeze? Apparently. Seems kind of messed up to me, honestly. Like, he carries her out of a building and suddenly they're dating? That's got to be some kind of ethical violation. Or she's just grateful, if you know what I mean. They both laughed, and Samantha felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. She walked away from the drinks table without her lemonade, her face burning, and found a quiet corner of the yard where she could be alone. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried to breathe through the shame coiling in her chest. This was what she'd been afraid of. This was what everyone would think. That she was pathetic, desperate. That she'd latched onto her rescuer like some kind of damsel in distress. That what she and Jacob had wasn't real, was just a cliché, was something to be mocked. Hey. She looked up to find Jacob standing in front of her, his brow furrowed with worry. What's wrong? You look like someone kicked your puppy. She thought about lying, about saying she was fine, but she and Jacob had promised each other honesty. I heard some of your colleagues talking about us, about how it's messed up that we're together. Jacob's expression darkened. Who? Who said that? It doesn't matter. They're probably right. Everyone's going to think. Everyone is not going to think anything, because what everyone thinks is irrelevant. He took her hands in his. Sam, I love these guys. I trust them with my life, but they don't know you. They don't know what we have, and their opinions about our relationship are exactly that. Their opinions. His grip tightened. I'll talk to them. I'll make it clear that... No. He blinked, surprised. No? No. If you go charging in there defending my honor, it's just going to make things worse. They'll think I'm sensitive or that I ran to you to fix my problems. She took a breath. I appreciate that you want to protect me, Jacob, but I need to handle this myself. He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see the conflict in his eyes, the instinct to fix things, warring with respect for her autonomy. What do you want to do? I want to go back to the party. I want to introduce myself properly, talk to people, let them get to know me. She squared her shoulders. I want to show them that I'm not some fragile victim who latched onto you out of desperation. I want them to see why you chose me. Jacob's expression softened into something like wonder. Have I mentioned that I like who you are? You might have said something about it once or twice. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Go show them who you are then. I'll be right here if you need me. She spent the rest of the afternoon doing exactly that. She talked to the other firefighters about their jobs, asked questions, listened to their stories. She met their wives and girlfriends and partners, made easy conversation, even made a few of them laugh. By the time the sun started to set, She'd won over most of the skeptics, including, she was pretty sure, the two guys who'd been talking about her by the hedge. On the drive home, Jacob reached over and took her hand. "You were incredible today." "I was terrified today." "Those two things aren't mutually exclusive." He squeezed her fingers. "I'm really proud of you, Sam. You didn't need me to save you. You saved yourself." She looked at their joined hands, at the easy way they fit together, and felt something click into place. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's how I know this is real. "What do you mean?" "You saved me from the fire because that's your job. But you're not my protector. You're not my hero. You're my partner." She looked up at him. "And partners don't save each other. They stand beside each other while they save themselves." He was quiet for a moment, and when she glanced over, she saw his eyes were bright. "That might be the best thing anyone's ever said to me." "I've been practicing. I have a whole list of romantic speeches prepared." He laughed, and the sound filled the car, warm and wonderful. "I look forward to hearing them." 3 months into their relationship, Samantha finally found a new apartment. It wasn't anything like her old place. It was smaller, on the 2nd floor instead of the 4th, in a different neighborhood entirely. But it had good light and a tiny balcony and a kitchen big enough to actually cook in. And when she signed the lease, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Jacob helped her move in, which, given that she'd lost almost everything in the fire, mostly meant helping her carry the things she'd accumulated since. New furniture from secondhand stores, boxes of books she'd slowly been rebuilding her collection with, kitchen supplies Kelsey had given her as a moving-out gift. They worked all day, and by evening the apartment was starting to look like a home. Samantha stood in the middle of her new living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and felt tears prick at her eyes. "Hey." Jacob came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Nothing's wrong. I'm just..." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. 3 months ago, I almost died. I lost everything. And now I'm standing in my own apartment with this incredible man who somehow thinks I'm worth his time, and I can't believe this is my life." He reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Believe it." "What if it goes away? What if something happens and I lose all of this too?" "Something might happen. Life is unpredictable. But Sam..." He tilted her chin up so she was looking directly into his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens, whatever challenges we face, I'm going to be right here beside you. Not saving you, not protecting you, just here. Because that's what partners do." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, security, home. They ordered pizza and ate it sitting on her new floor, surrounded by boxes, laughing about nothing and everything. And when the night got late and Jacob had to leave for his shift, Samantha walked him to the door and felt something she'd been afraid to let herself feel. "Jacob?" He turned, his hand on the door frame. "Yeah?" "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment she felt exposed, vulnerable, terrified of what he might say. But then his face split into that wide, genuine smile she'd come to adore, and he crossed the space between them in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. I love you too, Samantha. I've been wanting to say it for weeks. I was just waiting for the right moment. Is this the right moment? We're surrounded by cardboard boxes and you smell like pizza. I think it's perfect. He kissed her, deep and thorough, and when he finally pulled away, they were both breathless. I really have to go. I know. But I'll be back tomorrow. I know that too. He kissed her once more, quick and sweet, and then he was gone. Samantha closed the door behind him and leaned against it, her heart full to bursting. She was in love. Real, genuine, terrifying love. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. 6 months later, they were tangled together on Jacob's couch on a lazy Sunday afternoon, Murphy snoring at their feet, when Jacob's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted into something complicated. So, my parents want to come visit next month. Samantha felt her stomach flip. Oh. They've been asking about you. About us. They want to meet the woman I can't shut up about. You can't shut up about me? Apparently, I mention you a lot. My mom has started calling you the girl, like you're a character in a novel. He shifted to look at her. You don't have to meet them if you're not ready. I know it's a big step. Samantha thought about it. Meeting his parents felt monumental, like a declaration, like they were something serious, something permanent, which, she realized, they were. I want to meet them. His face lit up. Yeah? Yeah. If they're anything like you, I'm sure I'll love them. Fair warning, my mom is going to interrogate you about your intentions. My intentions are pure, I promise. Are they, though? She laughed and threw a pillow at him, and he caught it easily, his smile wide and carefree. These were the moments she treasured most. Not the dramatic declarations or the romantic gestures, but the ordinary ones. The pillow fights and lazy Sundays and inside jokes that no one else would understand. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Not constant fireworks, but steady warmth. Not desperate need, but comfortable want. Not fear of loss, but joy in presence. She'd found it. Against all odds, in the aftermath of the worst experience of her life, she'd found it. Jacob's parents were exactly what Samantha had expected, and nothing like she'd anticipated. His mother, Patricia, was a force of nature, small and fierce, with Jacob's green eyes and a personality that filled whatever room she entered. His father, Robert, was quieter, more measured, with a dry wit that emerged at unexpected moments. Together, they were warm and welcoming and utterly overwhelming. Patricia hugged Samantha the moment she walked through the door. Finally! We've heard so much about you. Jacob talks about nothing else. It's Samantha this and Samantha that. I was beginning to think he'd invented you. Mom. What? It's true. Your father and I were starting to wonder if you'd ever bring anyone home. Robert shook Samantha's hand, his grip firm and his expression kind. Don't mind her, she's just excited. We both are. The weekend that followed was a whirlwind of meals and conversations, and Murphy showing off his tricks for the admiring audience. Samantha braced herself for the interrogation Jacob had warned her about. But when it came, it wasn't what she expected. Patricia cornered her in the kitchen on Saturday afternoon, while Jacob and Robert were out walking Murphy. Can I ask you something, Samantha? Of course. Patricia leaned against the counter, her expression thoughtful. Jacob told us how you two met, the fire and everything. She paused. I want you to know that I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Some people might judge, might say it's strange or inappropriate. But love finds us in the most unexpected places. Samantha felt her throat tighten. Thank you. That means a lot. When I met Robert, he was my doctor. I'd been in a car accident, broken my leg in 3 places. He put pins in my knee and then asked me to dinner. She laughed. People said it was unprofessional, said I was vulnerable, said he was taking advantage. But we knew what we had, and 40 years later, we still do. I didn't know that. I'm telling you because I want you to know that you don't have to justify how you met my son. What matters is what you've built since. And from what I can see, what you've built is something real. She reached out and squeezed Samantha's hand. Jacob loves you. I've never seen him like this before. And I think you love him too. I do. I really do. Then that's all that matters. When Jacob and Robert returned, Samantha met Jacob's eyes across the room and saw the question there. Did it go okay? She smiled and nodded, and the relief that flooded his face made her heart swell. She'd passed. Not because she'd impressed his parents or said the right things, but because they'd seen what she and Jacob had. They'd seen that it was real. 1 year to the day after the fire, Samantha woke up to an empty bed. She lay there for a moment, confused, listening to the sounds of her apartment. Murphy was snoring in his bed in the corner. He'd started spending more nights here than at Jacob's, and they'd been talking about officially combining their living spaces. But Jacob was nowhere to be seen. Then she smelled coffee, and pancakes, and something else, something sweet and warm and comforting. She pulled on a robe and padded out to the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. Jacob was standing at the stove in his boxers and a t-shirt, spatula in hand, flipping pancakes with the concentration of a man defusing a bomb. The tiny kitchen table, which usually held her laptop and a stack of manuscripts she was editing, had been cleared and set for 2, with candles and flowers and her grandmother's wedding ring, which he must have retrieved from the jewelry box in her bedroom. Jacob? What's going on? He turned, and his smile was nervous and hopeful and so full of love that it took her breath away. Happy anniversary. Anniversary? We started dating 2 months after the fire, not... I know. But I figure today is the day that matters, the day our story really started. He set down the spatula and crossed to her, taking her hands in his. 1 year ago today, I walked into a burning building and found you, and my whole life changed. Her eyes were filling with tears. She didn't try to stop them. Jacob. I've been thinking about what I want to say all week. I had this whole speech prepared, but now that you're standing here, all I can think is... He swallowed hard. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Me. Not because I saved you. We both know that's not what this is about. But because you chose me. Every day, you choose me. You choose to be my partner, my best friend, my home. She was crying openly now, tears streaming down her cheeks. I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Samantha, will you marry me? She stared at the ring, a simple, elegant diamond that caught the morning light, and then at the man holding it, the man who had carried her out of flames and then spent a year proving that he saw her as so much more than someone to be rescued. The man who made her laugh and challenged her and held her when she cried and loved her exactly as she was. Yes. His face split into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. Yeah? Yes, you ridiculous man. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands. And then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and Murphy was barking excitedly, and the pancakes were probably burning, but neither of them cared. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and laughing and crying, Jacob pressed his forehead against hers. I love you, Samantha. I love you too. More than I ever thought I could love anyone. Even though I'm a ridiculous man? Especially because you're a ridiculous man. He laughed and pulled her close, and she buried her face in his chest, breathing in the smell of him, coffee and pancakes, and something that was just Jacob, her future husband. A year ago, she'd lost everything. And somehow, from the ashes, she'd found more than she ever dreamed she could have. The wedding was small and perfect. They held it in the garden of a historic inn upstate, with only their closest friends and family in attendance. Kelsey was Samantha's maid of honor. Jacob's sister flew in from Boston to be there. Patricia cried through the entire ceremony, and Robert pretended not to cry, and Murphy wore a little bow tie and behaved himself remarkably well. Samantha walked down the aisle in a simple white dress, her grandmother's ring tucked into her bouquet, and saw Jacob waiting for her at the end. He was wearing a gray suit that made his eyes look impossibly green, and when he saw her, he smiled so wide that she thought his face might split in two. When she reached him, he took her hands, and she could see that his were shaking. You look incredible. You clean up pretty well yourself. The officiant began, but Samantha barely heard the words. She was too busy looking at Jacob, remembering the first time she'd seen his face, smoke-stained and exhausted, looking down at her with relief and determination. He'd been a stranger then. Now he was everything. When it was time for their vows, Jacob went first. He'd written his own. And as he spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. Samantha, the day I met you was the day I stopped just existing and started actually living. You were scared and brave and so determined to survive. And when I carried you out of that building, I had no idea that I was carrying my entire future in my arms. He squeezed her hands. I promise to be your partner in everything, to stand beside you, not in front of you, to support your dreams and celebrate your successes, and hold you when things get hard. I promise to love you not because you need me, but because we chose each other, every day, for the rest of our lives. Samantha was crying again. She seemed to do a lot of that these days. Jacob, a year and a half ago, I thought I'd lost everything. But I didn't lose everything. I lost things, objects, possessions, and in their place, I found you. She took a shaky breath. You taught me that home isn't a building. It's not brick and mortar and fire escapes and vintage books. Home is a person. Home is you. I promise to be your home too, to give you a place to land after hard days and long shifts, to remind you that you're more than your job, more than the lives you save, to love you for who you are, not what you do. I promise to spend the rest of my life building something beautiful with you, something that can't be destroyed by flames or fear or anything else. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and when Jacob kissed her, their friends and family erupted into cheers. Murphy howled in excitement. Patricia sobbed into Robert's shoulder. Kelsey wolf whistled. And Samantha, wrapped in the arms of the man she loved, felt like she was finally, truly home. 3 years later, Samantha sat in the nursery of their home, a cozy townhouse they'd bought together, with a backyard big enough for Murphy and a spare room that had become her writing office, and watched her husband rock their daughter to sleep. Lily was 3 months old. They'd named her after the little girl Jacob had lost, the one he still thought about sometimes, the one whose memory had almost driven him away from the job that had brought him to Samantha. It had felt right, a way to honor the past while celebrating the future. Jacob looked up and caught her watching. He smiled, that same smile he'd given her in the ambulance bay, and something warm and wonderful spread through her chest. She's almost out. She's beautiful. She looks like you. She has your eyes. Poor kid. Samantha laughed softly, mindful of the sleeping baby, and crossed the room to stand beside them. She looked down at Lily's tiny face, peaceful in her father's arms, and felt overwhelmed by love. Did you ever think we'd end up here? That first day, when you pulled me out of that fire? Jacob shifted Lily in his arms, carefully settling her in her crib. When he straightened up, he slid an arm around Samantha's waist and pulled her close. No, I thought you'd be another face I'd carry with me, another person I saved and never saw again. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I'm so glad I was wrong. Me too. They stood there together, watching their daughter sleep, and Samantha thought about all the paths that had led them here. A faulty wire in an old building, a day she'd decided to stay home instead of going out, a firefighter who'd chosen to bring her the remnants of her old life instead of just moving on. 1,000 tiny choices that had added up to this moment, this family, this love, this life. She'd been trapped in smoke once, helpless and terrified and certain she was going to die. And then she'd heard his voice, and everything had changed. Now, standing in the quiet nursery, she understood something she hadn't known then. The fire had taken everything from her. But it had also given her everything that mattered. I love you, Jacob. I love you too, Samantha. Always. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Murphy was snoring in the corner. Lily was sleeping peacefully, and Samantha, surrounded by everything she'd built from the ashes of her old life, had never felt more complete. Did you like the story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, comment which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next videos. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching!